Welcome to a special edition of Eye on Bankruptcy, coming to you from the annual spring meeting of the American Bankruptcy Institute. Our guest right now is Suzanne Koenig, founder of SAK Management Services, a provider of consulting and management services for the long-term and the healthcare industry. Suzanne is a co-chair of the ABI Healthcare Insolvency Committee.
That's correct.
And as I like to say, she's a real person,
I'm
not a lawyer. She is a businesswoman who has run more healthcare facilities than you can shake a stick at. And we're going to talk about that. First off, I want to say that I guess it was about 5 years ago when there was an uptick in insolvencies of health and long-term care facilities and hospitals. So I thought, well, you know, that industry is cyclical, probably just like everything else, so we'll have 3 years of it and then it'll be over and the industry will be healthy. But lo and behold, at least from my point of view, if anything, it looks like problems in healthcare, financially speaking, are getting worse. Now, is my conception right or wrong? And what's the problem in healthcare?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Bill, because healthcare was never really properly fixed. You know, we all thought Obamacare maybe would be a solution, but Obamacare was conceived in different pods, so to speak. The people that were trying to fix one aspect of it didn't communicate with the people that were trying to fix the other aspect, so nobody really knew how it all came together. And so basically, hospitals are getting penalized, healthcare reimbursements are going down all over. It's not just a state problem, it's a federal problem, and state governments have to balance their budgets on the backs of the Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements, and 80% of really healthcare is provided by third parties, Medicaid and Medicare. So, you know, when you have an ill-conceived type of a rule that you're trying to put on every single state, it's really not going to work.
So do you see a fix on the horizon?
Well, I do. I don't think that repeal and replace was necessarily the correct way to go, but absolutely, it's got to be fixed. It cannot continue the way it is. All of the insurance providers are pulling out of the exchanges. So, you know that insurance deductibles, healthcare insurance, has skyrocketed, tripled. Small businesses can't do business. And, you know, what's interesting on the hospitals and the post-acute side is the Accountable Care Act and the ACOs, the organization. So what's happened is hospitals are penalized if they discharge patients either to the community or to long-term care or to any other kind of post-acute if they return to the hospital within 30 days. And so what's happening is that the hospitals are partnering with just a few post-acute providers, and other post-acute providers are being left out because this little merge, so to say, of the organizational team is not enough to care for our entire population. So revenues are down. Hospitals are afraid. If they keep someone longer than they should, they're also getting penalized. So a lot of hospitals are putting patients in observation mode. If you're in observation status, you're not really admitted to the hospital, when in fact you're in a physical bed of the hospital, but they don't treat you as a real live admission. So if you're there more than 3 days, you can't go to a post-acute care center and get Medicare benefits. You're not entitled because you weren't in for 3 midnights, when in fact you were physically in the building, but they don't count that as an admission. It's all these little, you know, games to trick the system, because Obamacare, again, is not the system that's going to take us forward.
Well, you know, assuming you have an institution with financial problems, we would assume, at least I would assume, that Chapter 11 reorganization is a way to deal with it, assuming you just don't want to shut it down and liquidate the thing. But you've told me that receiverships actually can work.
Receiverships can
So
work.
Susie, tell me, how do you manage to get a receivership to work when you have maybe dozens of suppliers who aren't paid? How does the process work? Who starts the receivership?
Well, it's so what's interesting on the receivership end, it's not just for the suppliers and the vendors. It's really the ultimate remedy for a landlord. Because most landlords, let's face it, if you're not paying your vendors, you're probably not paying your lease payments either.
Yep.
Or if you're an owner, you're not paying the ownership costs, the mortgage payments. And when either lessees or owners, when they buy facilities and sign up on master lease agreements or on ownership documents, there's always the small print that says if you have covenant defaults or if something happens, the lender can bring in a receiver. Now, what's interesting is I don't think many lenders really took heed of that themselves, because operating a facility, being stuck with a facility as a lender, is something that is just absolutely beyond anyone's reproach. They don't in lender liability. So when they know that there's someone out there, such as myself, that has the experience, and I'm actually an owner operator myself, and I've been in the business for 30 years, I can kind of jump right into the, we'll call them debtor maybe, into their position. I can maintain the license, I can maintain the operation, I can maintain the asset, and I can, what happens is you write your own kind of receiver order. There's no specific remedy on how an order, like there's not a statute here or following this guideline. Like in bankruptcy, you have to follow everything. So it's all in the orders. And so whatever my remedies are as a receiver, I go in, present it to the judge, and the judge approves the order. Mm-hmm. That way, most of the time, when the receiver is appointed, there's pre-receiver debt. And so that kind of gets stayed, almost like a bankruptcy.
Okay.
And so it's really for the benefit of the creditors as well, because then you have the owner or the lessee working it out with the lender, working out the negotiation, and it's so much cheaper than bankruptcy because you don't have to worry about all the different committees and all the different costs involved in the bankruptcy process. And if you work it out and you're able to emerge a much better situation and then give it back possibly either to the debtor, then that works out too. But then there's two other opportunities. So oftentimes I'm coming in to tee up the sale. So instead of foreclosing on the
well, let's go back and,
okay.
Before we get to the end game, let's talk about the first part. If I understood you correctly, you were saying that it would be more often than not the owner of the facility. I mean the real estate.
Right.
Well, actually, I guess we ought to define who the players are.
Okay.
Presume there's somebody who owns the real estate and leases it.
So what usually occurs, the common way that these things are done, is that there's separate LLCs. So there's a separate entity that owns the real estate that usually leases it to the
and the owner of the real
entity.
estate could even be an REIT or something like
Correct.
that, right?
The owner of the real estate can be a REIT.
Okay.
For sure.
So they lease it to an operator. Mm-hmm. The operator has funding from somebody else?
So usually operators have a separate entity and they have funding from a third party, from a lender, which they have lines of credit.
Okay, working capital lender.
Working capital.
Okay, all right. Okay, and did I understand you correctly that it's the real estate owner that probably initiates the receivership?
That's correct.
Okay, now, is this done consensually with the operator or over the operator's dead body?
So it's both. It can be both. So sometimes, you can consent to something, but honestly, what's going on is that the lender is trying to work with the owner of the property or with the operator, and there's been so many different starts and stops and different opportunities, and it's just not successful. So when it gets to the point where it's broiling, usually what happens is the lender will come in, the element of surprise in bankruptcy, in court, whether it be federal court or state court, depending on where it's filed, and the element of surprise is what takes over. And usually they have to define as part of the receiver order to get it approved that there's danger to the patients, whereby the vendors are either not being paid or the health and safety. No judge wants on their watch to know that there's a healthcare facility that's in trouble and something's going to happen.
Right. Well, now, can a receivership actually be better for the owner, the operator, than a bankruptcy?
It can be. Well, because it's less expensive. I mean, when for the owner, obviously, you got to go and get your DIP lending. You have all the committees, the U.S. trustee fees, and who knows, at some point, not only that, but their personal guarantees. So what you can do, though, is you can work out with the lender. But in all honesty, most of the cases that I'm seeing is things sometimes don't get worked out. So
what's the end game?
So the end game is either the lender will foreclose, which takes time.
Meaning the owner of the real estate?
The owner of the real estate will foreclose on the operating entity, and then I myself am in there as a receiver, but I'm operating the not only overseeing the real estate, but also the operating entity, and I'm making sure that the patients are safe, that the residents are safe, and I maintain the license as well. And so what they'll do is they can tee it up for another operator. I can be in there for a period of time. I can get an operating company, either an operating company that I own because I own a healthcare operating company, or a third-party operating company to come in and operate, improve the operation. So then if it's a REIT, they can go out and find another lessee and not have to take a beating on the price on another lessee coming in and telling them, I'm not going to pay that price.
So the owner of the real property, or the REIT, whatever it happens to be, writes a new lease as part of the end game with whoever? Is that usually the way it works?
Yes, and because at this point, the lessee that's in there right now is not paying the lease payments. The business is going down. The vendors, but so from a trailing perspective, anyone new coming in there looking at it is going to say, I'm not going to pay that. So if we can get in there, improve the operation, they can get a decent lease payment. But in the meantime, I'm in there protecting the asset while they can bring on another lessee.
Well, I can see how that can have advantages for the owner of the real property, because you've got fewer layers of expense.
Correct.
And better control over who your new operator is.
That's
I guess.
true. Yeah, and you pick your new operator, and most of these REITs may have someone waiting in the wings already,
really?
that they've already worked with, and that so usually what I do is I'll be in there. I'll apply for a new license, help the new entity apply for a new license. I'll maintain everything that's going on, and then eventually do an inter-operational transfer agreement to the new entity. Mm-hmm. I'll transfer the debtor's entity to the new entity.
Well, that's, Susie, that fits right in with the bad rap on Chapter 11, that it's just too expensive.
It's too expensive. And oftentimes, too, they'll foreclose. Now, if it's an owner and not a REIT, they'll foreclose on the owner, and I will tee it up for sale through an investment banker or through,
Can you conduct a foreclosure while the operation continues, or does it have to shut down?
No, I can do it
Really?
through the foreclosure.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, wow, that's the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So it's really a remedy for lenders and landlords that is lower cost and preserves their asset, preserves the license.
Now, would there be anything in it for unsecured creditors, suppliers who are owed a bunch of money?
So, it really is for them as well, because if you think about it, they have an operator that's not doing a good job, they're already not getting paid. What's the chances that they're going to get something? At least if someone comes in that can go in efficiently, try to turn it around during this whole process, there's a possibility that the pre-receiver debt is reviewed, analyzed, and after whatever the outcome is, they may get more, more pennies on the dollar, based with a better operator, at least to recover whatever they have.
I see. And in the meantime, they have a customer who's probably paying the bills faster.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Post-receiver, I pay the bills. They're all current. So they're in there. So I try to maintain the same vendors so that they can get paid. And in some states, obviously the states are not paying Medicaid on time, so there could be a delay of 60 or 90 days, but they know they're going to get paid. So most post-receiver debt gets paid.
Well, that certainly
So it's an
is
advantage for them.
a breath of fresh air.
Absolutely. It stops the bleeding for them.
Yes, right. Well, Suzanne Koenig, I thank you very much for your time. This is
Thank you.
really eye-opening. It tells us there is an alternative for a sick healthcare institution, and I got to tell you, it also maybe makes me wonder if this isn't a feasible alternative for other kinds of businesses.
I entirely agree, and I think there are receiverships. There are certain states that are really embrace this. The state of Wisconsin, if you look at, and not just healthcare, they have looked at other aspects.
Well, Suzanne Koenig, thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
day. See you again.
Thank you.